On today's show, the Hawks erase a 21-point second-half deficit on the way to a very exciting win over the Milwaukee Bucks on this Friday. Plus, the latest on the deadline, what Landry Fields had to say, Quinn Snyder, the new players, and more, and all that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1906 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening here in February. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the start of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you happen to find your podcasts. We're on YouTube. Please like the video as you're watching us on that video platform. Plus, we're also on audio platforms like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, etc. And please help us to spread the word about the podcast. In fact, it's been a very, very busy week on the show. This is like our 7th episode of the last 5 days, basically. And this is going to be really busy even as well as the Hawks got a big win tonight. But even before that, I did quite a bit of trade deadline coverage. On Thursday evening, I reacted to all of the day's events, so the DeAndre Hunter trade, Bogdanovich trade, the fallout, and all of that in a sort of major episode there. And then earlier today on Friday afternoon, I did a mailbag episode on basically leftover questions from Thursday, etc. And there's more to come on all of this as well, including on this episode later on. But because the Hawks had a very, very interesting win tonight, I'm going to begin with that wild victory, and then we'll come back to later on the comments from Landry Fields, Quinn Snyder, etc., and the latest news on the Hawks. But this is their first meeting with Milwaukee that the Hawks have had since the NBA Cup semifinals back in December in Las Vegas. And this time it's a 115-110 victory for Atlanta. No Giannis for the Bucks, which definitely is notable, of course, but the Hawks were also very, very shorthanded in this game. The 3 new additions for the Hawks did not arrive. Well, they were there with the Hawks, not in uniform. So the Hawks were down to 11 players, including all 3 two-ways and Gueye, who had a surprisingly awesome game tonight. So all that said, the Hawks, even without Giannis, were underdogs in this game at tip-off, according to our friends at FanDuel. And then, as I sort of alluded to earlier, they were down by 21 points in the second half of this game. And from that point forward, they were basically lights out on the way to a 1-0, basically. If you want to say this, the Hawks are now 1-0 post-deadline. And for the season now, 24-28, which is not anything incredible, but they do have a 2-game lead now for the 9 spot in the East, on 4 or 5 games on the 11th spot. So very solid night at the office for Atlanta, and certainly one that I will not soon forget. So, look, we'll dive into this one as far as my broad takeaways are concerned and what I actually take away from this game. But if you are new to the podcast, and at least I would hope we have some new listeners in the last couple of days, what we do on these game breakdowns is kind of go big picture early on, my takeaways, analysis, etc. Then later on in the show, we'll kind of get a little bit more granular, get into how the game unfolded, my observations along the way, and then at the end of the podcast, some player evaluations, just who played well, what guys did, stats, etc. And we kind of paint the whole picture with nuance and context about the games that the Hawks are playing. But look, the big thing is this is kind of a tale of two halves to the absolute max. The game of runs moniker gets overused sometimes. The NBA is always full of runs, but this is one that was actually kind of insane. One stat to illustrate that, the Bucks scored 76 points in the first 24 and a half minutes of this game. That is a lot of points in that span. And they led, of course, by 21 points at the end of 24 and a half minutes of action. And then after that, they scored 34 points in the final 23 and a half minutes of the game. So Milwaukee ends up with 110, but it was not evenly distributed 110 in this game. The Hawks defensively had a 107 defensive rating, so they allowed 1.07 points per possession in this game. That is very, very good. Even when you adjust for no Giannis and all that stuff, that's very, very good as an overall figure. But truly, it was a split down the middle. So in the first half, the Hawks had a 138 defensive rating, giving up 73 points to the Bucks. That's really bad. And Milwaukee had this 47-point second quarter that was ludicrous. Now, granted, some of that was Milwaukee shooting the heck out of the ball in a way that the Hawks couldn't necessarily prevent, but the defensive quality did wax and wane. In the early portions of this game, it was not great. After halftime, it was quite good. It was magnified by Milwaukee having this great shooting start and then cold shooting finish, but it was all wrapped into one, and the Hawks did a good job defensively after halftime with a 74 defensive rating. So they allowed 37 points after halftime, 74 defensive rating. That is 0.74 points per possession. That is elite stuff. And yes, they were due for some shooting regression after that first half, but still, the Hawks did basically that regression does not account for all of that drop off. The Hawks played very well defensively in the second half. Milwaukee was 19 of 50 from three in this game. That's a lot of attempts and 38%. That's a good number for the offense, bad for the defense. But everything else basically was good for the Hawks. They held the Bucks to sub 50% on twos. That's great. Only 10 free throw attempts allowed to a high free throw team. That's also very, very good. And also a very, very impressive elite, what I would say, defensive rebounding game. The Bucks grabbed fewer than 15% basically of their own missed shots in this game. The Hawks were great on the defensive glass. And that was illustrated to some degree with all of the individual stuff. Like, for instance, 3 guys had 10 rebounds or more for Atlanta. But really, it was a team effort. Everyone rebounded in this game, with the exception of Garrison Matthews, who didn't have one in 6 minutes. Everyone did their job on the defensive glass. Okongwu had 6 defensive rebounds. Ricochet had multiple. Barlow had multiple. Trae Young had multiple. Dyson had 6. Gueye had 10. Vit Krejci had a career-high 9 defensive rebounds in this game. So they were flying around and playing well there and really kind of holding up against a team that really had a barrage going in that first half. Obviously, it was kind of the tale of two halves for both sides of the floor. Offensively, I would say it was not quite as good overall as the defense, but they did more than enough to win and really only had like one bad quarter of offense. They scored 19 points in that disastrous second period. But other than that, they were pretty consistent in the entire game offensively. They shot, 58% true shooting in the game, which is actually well above average. Even with missing 6 free throws, they were 12 of 18 at the line, which is not very good. And then also they had a very dismal 6 of 18 from floater range. And that range is basically that 3.5 to like 10-foot range on twos, where mostly they shoot floaters from that range. And the Hawks were not good in that area. And they still managed to post good efficiency because they made a bunch of threes in this one. 13 of 36, which is not incredibly high volume, but certainly good enough. And then 29 assists, a big number there. A really good passing game for Atlanta on the whole, and only 11 turnovers. Plus, they got to the rim, all the way to the rim, more than usual in this game. They had 60 points in the paint, a lot of those kind of right at the teeth of the Milwaukee defense. The backup units for Milwaukee were really not potent, let's just say, especially defensively. For instance, Brook Lopez kind of anchored those groups by himself. Bobby Portis was actually good for Milwaukee in this game, but everybody else, not so much. And the Hawks had really good balance. Usually on a night like this, it might take one guy going off. And often that's Trae Young, for instance. Trae was only okay to be even below average for him in some respects in this game. But the Hawks had 7 guys in double figures. Very, very balanced. By the way, all of them had at least 11 points. Only Trae had more than 15 points in the game with 24, but 14 for Okongwu, 13 for Ricochet, 15 for Dyson, 15 for Gueye, 11 for Larry Nance, and 11 for Vit Krejci. Everyone that played in the game, all 10 guys, scored for the Hawks. So it was one of those nights where like it was just really, really balanced. They passed the ball well. Trae, Dyson come out for 17 assists. Like, that's not just one guy doing everything in this game. It was a very balanced effort and really a fun game. Like, it shows a lot of resilience. I know that in the middle of a losing streak like the Hawks had, last week, a couple weeks ago, it can be easy to get flustered and frustrated with a team that you are emotionally invested in. But something that I have been saying all year long, I would say again tonight, the Hawks are extremely resilient this year. They don't roll over in games. They don't always win, but they usually have punches left that they actually can throw in the second half of games. When they get down early, and look, there's something to be said for not trailing by 21 points in the third quarter of a game. That does matter. We'll get into more of what actually happened in that first half later on in this podcast, but the Hawks continue to fight. And it's a pretty, I think, admirable trait of this team. They just continue to have that push. And Quinn said it a lot. The players said it. I think they all feel it. I've covered teams in different cities and even Hawks teams that were not quite as resilient as this one so far. So they're not the most talented team in the world. They do get some reinforcements coming up with the trades that actually brought 3 guys who I think are very quality rotation players into the fold. But tonight, they won a game without any of those guys. They played all 3 of their 2 ways in this game. They were shorthanded, and they still, down 21 points in the third quarter, came all the way back and won a pretty close and memorable game in Atlanta. So we'll get into more of this game when it comes later on in the podcast, plus some non-game content when it comes to Landry Fields' comments today, Quinn Snyder's comments today, deadline stuff, the latest news, and more. All that is coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That is over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive a 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year. From first match, must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on the data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. All right, and I'll have more on the game coming up. And if the Hawks had lost, I might have led with this stuff. But in the meantime, it's just lots of non-game notes. So one more time, I will plug. I recommend you listening to both shows I did on Thursday night and on Friday afternoon, covering a lot about the deadline, what the Hawks did with the trades of DeAndre Hunter and Bogdanovic, my reaction, my analysis, all of that. Plus, if you are an audio listener to the show, Apple, Spotify, etc., you will have also seen that the full press conference tonight from Landry Fields is in the audio feeds. So listen to that, subscribe on audio platforms. Not a ton of news made by Landry. Landry's not always the most candid guy in the world. He does give some stock answers sometimes, but he did all but confirm what I had already passed along as my strong suspicion, that Bones Hyland was going to be not joining the Hawks at some point. They're working on a buyout. Nothing has been official right now, but Landry did kind of just very much candidly say, we're working on something with Bones Hyland, and that means that there's a buyout probably in the works, and he'll be waived soon enough. So at least as of now, from what Landry said, what I've been told, he will not report to the team, and they'll also have an open roster spot that we'll discuss at a later date. I asked Landry about whether Clint Capella was going to rejoin the team post-deadline, because that was at least somewhat in question. He said yes to that, and then 2 hours later, Clint was on the bench tonight. Now, he was out for the game with what the Hawks were listing as personal reasons, but he was on the bench with the team, looked to be in good spirits, talking to the guys in huddles, things like that. So good sign there. Later did note some stuff that as far as they did talk to teams about Clint in the trade market. It would have been silly to not admit that because everyone knew that. But the quote was from Landry that, quote, they ultimately felt the value of Capella being here far outweighed anything that we were looking at coming in, end quote. So from what I've heard, obviously the Hawks were willing to move Clint, but they were wary of taking bad salary back. And when you make $20 million like Clint does, it's hard to move you without taking some salary back unless you're paid to do that. So the Hawks basically just decided, look, he's worth more to us this year than he would have been to make a bad trade. I joked about this earlier this week, but making a bad trade is worse than not making a trade. Is kind of what I would say. Even if you are not a Capella fan, that's fine, but there's no reason to make a bad trade for a guy who's expiring. So basically, he'll come back to the team. He will actually help them. I think, Clint is still better than their backup center options. I think Okongwu is going to be starting for the duration now, as he should be, in my opinion. But you do have Clint's bird rights at the end of the season. That can have value. So I don't know if he'll play on Saturday, TBD on that, as the Hawks play in Washington tomorrow. But he's back with the team, and that is notable. Also, I asked Landry about whether the future finances had anything to do with the Hunter trade, and he referenced that you always have to account for that, basically. And he also noted, quote, being diligent around aprons, end quote, pointing to the fact that going over certain aprons makes you restricted in some areas. Let's just say this. The apron thing is true, but also noteworthy that the aprons are well above the actual luxury tax line, where the Hawks have not been in more than 10 years at this point in time. So anyway, I say all that. Publicly available, that entire press conference, it's 23 minutes long. It's on the feed, in the audio feeds. So that's the biggest news items, but certainly worth listening to there to hear Landry talk about Trae Young, the new guys coming in, a farewell to Bogey and Hunter, etc. That's all there if you want to find it in the audio feeds. Quinn Snyder talks about those guys tonight as well. Pre-game, he gave some glowing words, as you might expect, for Hunter and for Bogey and for Roddy. He did note Karis LeVert has the ability, quote, to create for himself and for other guys, end quote, something he finds valuable there. He praised Karis LeVert as a, quote, very determined and efficient defender, end quote. I agree with all of that. LeVert's a pretty good defender and someone who does have some real juice offensively, so a nice addition coming in for the Hawks. Quinn praised Terrence Mann's versatility, as well as, quote, his ability to guard multiple positions, knock down shots, and compete on both ends of the floor, end quote. And then Quinn also coached George Niang in Utah. So there's a history there. They like each other a lot. It seems like Quinn was positive about Niang's impact as a person and also pointed about his shooting, which is certainly his number one aspect on the court. But all three guys talked tonight together on the same podium. LeVert, Mann, and Niang all are clearly pros. Like, those guys are all well liked. I did some digging from guys who have covered them and guys and gals who cover them in other places. Everyone seems to like all three of them, which is noteworthy for sure. And certainly nothing was like hugely revelatory from the press conference, but George Niang is very funny. That's one thing. But, Mann and LeVert seem to be all fine. This is Mann's first time he's ever been traded, so he was certainly probably a little bit shell-shocked, I would imagine, leaving LA, but he has ties to Atlanta with his mom, who's a coach. So anyway, there's lots of stuff there, but certainly nothing huge from that, but notable. Non-deadline note here, Zachary Ricochet is going to be in the skills challenge at All-Star Weekend. Barring a last-second change, he's going to be the only Hawks rep at the All-Star game, but he's also in the skills challenge in addition to the Rising Stars challenge. He's actually going to be paired with Alex Sarr, which is kind of funny because Alex Sarr, if you missed it, of course, spurned the Hawks this summer, did not want to come to Atlanta in the draft. So those guys are paired together. That'll be a little interesting. But anyway, Ricochet will be in San Francisco. That'll be happening next week. Notable. One more thing here on the non-game front is that Chris Fedor, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, who's been covering the Cavs for a long time, reported that the Hawks asked for the 2031 first-round pick from the Cavs in the Hunter trade. The Cavs said no, and then the Hawks also asked about Jalen Tyson, their first-round pick from last year, and the Cavs, quote, weren't willing to include him, end quote. Now, this is not hugely surprising, to be sure. Obviously, the Hawks are going to ask about the one pick. By the way, Cleveland only has one pick that they could have offered. It was that pick. I am sure that was a conversation topic. In fact, I would report that right now. They talked about that pick. Cleveland wanted to hold it out. The Hawks couldn't get them to include it. Notable there. Tyson wasn't as much of a given. Like, not every first-round pick previously has a value to the other team that's calling about them. But in the end, they were rebuffed on what they asked for. That's not a huge news story, but just kind of notable. And look, I said this on the mailbag podcast I did earlier today. I would have walked away and not done the trade. That's where I was. I don't think it's terrible, as I talked about at length on that show that you should listen to. But I would have walked away without a first-round pick. That would have been my line in the sand personally. They didn't get one, and there you go. And one more thing on the reporting / deadline front. Brian Windhorst, friend of the podcast from ESPN, on his podcast, Hoop Collective, he did not flat out report this. He made sure to note it for the aggregators, but he did say that he expects Brandon Ingram to sign in Toronto for a, quote, 9-figure contract. That means $100+ million. Now, that's only relevant because the Hawks were in on Ingram to the end, and Hawks fans were not happy when they didn't get Ingram. But the combination of I would not have paid the price in trade assets to get Ingram, and I also would have been very skittish to pay Ingram $100+ million. So I don't know if that makes anybody feel better, but it's at least noteworthy because the Hawks were in there all the way to the end. And I'll have more news later on. That's kind of a roundup for now, and we'll go back to the game before I go crazy long on this podcast. Okay, to the game. As I said before, the first half was certainly up and down. That was the case. So clunky start. The Hawks. This is crazy to say out loud. The Hawks lost the first half of this game by 18 points, and in that first half, they had themselves a 19-2 run to go up by 12. They actually hit 7 threes in the first quarter, 19-2 run, up by 12. Just weird, basically, that all happened in a half they lost by 18. They actually had 10 of their 11 guys that were active played in this game. No Daquan Plowden. Everybody else played. Barlow started at the 4. It was Wallace, Krejci, and Nance in their normal roles. And then Mo Gueye returned to the floor. He had not played in about a week and a half in Atlanta. He did, however, play in Birmingham last night with Plowden in the G League. And I don't think he's going to play tomorrow in Washington. Nothing official there, but people are going to be mad about this. I can already see it coming, so I'm trying to say it out loud on the podcast. It's because if he doesn't play tomorrow, or at least be available tomorrow, it will have been his third game in 3 days. And at the NBA professional basketball, you don't play 3 games in 3 days very often. So I imagine the Hawks do not want him to play tomorrow. It's just, in case that happens, that will be the reason why. But Mo is really good in this game, which is why I'm saying that now. People are going to be very excited about this. He had a huge block right away at Brook Lopez. That was notable. Made a corner 3. It's still rocky on offense for Mo. As good as he was in this game, it's still kind of rocky. Like, he had 15 points on 12 shooting possessions, which is actually totally fine. But he did have one situation, a couple times where he kind of didn't make the right play, like pass wise versus shoot wise. He's very aggressive. I love watching Mo play tonight. He was awesome. But just you can kind of see if you look closely at the little bit of a rockiness offensively. But look, he showed out on defense all the way through this game, and that definitely mattered. So the last possession of the first quarter, Larry Nance makes a mistake and lets Bobby Portis gets in front of him for an inbounds pass at the buzzer. He scores, cuts the lead to 10. No problem, right? Let's just say it was a problem. That play was just one play, but from there, it was a 35-11 run by Milwaukee in about 7 minutes. They scored 35 points in 7 minutes, and they turned a 12-point lead for the Hawks into a 12-point deficit for the Hawks in 7 minutes. Wild stuff. Milwaukee made 9 consecutive threes. 9 in a row. Now, again, part of that's bad defense, but not all of that. Some of that's bad luck as well. It's always a bit of nuance there, but that's just what it is. And look, it was a brutal quarter. There was literally one thing I wanted to say that was positive about that quarter. Zachary Shea had a great left-handed finish over Brook Lopez. That was very impressive. That's basically it. 47-19 in favor of Milwaukee in that quarter. Full stop. One of the worst 3 quarters of the season, basically, for the Hawks. Like, certainly on the short list. I don't know if it was definitely the worst, but certainly on the short list. They lost it by 28 points in a quarter. They went from being up 12 with literally 1 second left in the first quarter to being down by 18 at halftime. A 30-point swing in 12 and a half minutes. Outrageous stuff. Anyway, we'll stop there for now. We'll get into the second half in a second because it's much, much, much more positive because obviously it had to be when you come from a 21-point deficit all the way back to win a game. But in the meantime, we'll get to that in a second. Stay tuned, though, for a word from our partners. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Are you looking for tickets for your next big event? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sporting event, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache for you. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works right now. The app does all the hard work for you and does not waste your time with endless searches. In fact, I'm using Gametime Picks for a long time now, and I love it for many reasons. They have these curated deals, make it very simple to find tickets at a great price. No more actual sifting through thousands of options that you actually don't want. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat. I couldn't believe the value on that as well. It was an absolute steal. And the seat view feature is a game changer for me. Before you actually even hit buy on the app, you can see what the seat actually was going to look like in the venue. That's also really reassuring. And the best part is you're actually covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee, and your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation if something happens to come up for you. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets right now with the folks at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, use that account and create it over at Gametime and use that code. It's LOCKEDONNBA. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, the much more entertaining and positive half for the Hawks was the second half, and really a lot of it was the third quarter. So after the Hawks had that disastrous, and I do mean disastrous, second quarter, they erased almost all of it with an awesome third quarter. 37-17 in the quarter, a 33-12 run overall to tie the game, which included a 12-0 run for the Hawks. Finally, the Milwaukee missed some shots, which was helpful in that run. They also played well. The Bucks didn't score a point for 6.5 minutes in the fourth quarter. 6.5 minutes from the end of the end of the third to the beginning of the fourth. 6.5 minutes. How about this? The Hawks only scored 6 points in 6.5 minutes. And normally that's a disaster. Like, if that's all you do, if all you know is that I tell you the Hawks will score 6 points in 6.5 minutes, I would say you're probably going to lose that stretch by 8, 10, maybe more. And they won it by 6 because they didn't allow a single point in that stretch. It was hideous basketball for a while. But that was enough to take the lead. Mo Gueye, as I said before, was awesome in this game. He had a wild sequence where he had 2 big blocks. He was flying around, also like basically missed a dunk. It bounced in, but it was a weird play. He actually missed 2 dunks in this game. But yeah, just energy all over the place, like just foot to the floor, pedal to the metal all the time for Mo, which is certainly a roller coaster ride in a fun way. But the Hawks also had one more hiccup in this game. They were up 8 with 5 minutes to go with the ball. And 80 seconds later, about a minute and a half, they were only up by 1. So like kind of a hiccup there with like 3.5 minutes to go. They call timeout after a total breakdown defensively to allow wide open 3. Quinn was furious, and rightly so. But after that, they stabilized really, really well. Part of that was a couple of just incredibly impressive passes. One was by Dyson Daniels to literally set a new career high in assists, a great find to Okongwu for a layup. And then after a stop, Trey found Gueye for a dunk. And those two big passes, big setups, easy buckets were huge. They went by 7 points with 2 minutes to go. Dame Lillard did hit one preposterous three, as he is wont to do. And but after that, the Hawks did a good job of like not folding. Trey had a nice floater after that. Anyway, I won't go over the entire stretch run, but it was never, I mean, it was in doubt, to be sure, but all the Hawks had to do was kind of not kick the can, and they didn't at the end. So after that, the big shot for me anyway, after the Dame three, was that they scored right away. Trey hitting the floater to go back up by 6. It was never closer than 4 from that point forward, and they went by 5 in the end. So, man, the second half, 60-37 after halftime. And again, if you want to take away, the Bucks hit a 3 on their first possession of the third quarter. Remove that, 60-34 over a 23.5-minute span. Just dominant stuff. And yeah, I know Milwaukee didn't have Giannis. I get it. But the Hawks didn't have Jalen Johnson. They didn't have what they sent out in the trades. They didn't have what they got in the trades. It was a skeleton crew for the Hawks, and they still did this, and it was very, very impressive. All right, to the player-by-player evaluations in this game. Like I said, all 10 guys played. 10 of the 11 guys who were active played. No Plowden in this game. Garrison Matthews did not play in the second half, which I thought was the right decision. He was not good in the first half. I will be interested to see if Garrison plays much when everybody is around. And when I mean everybody, I mean Niang, Mann, and LeVert. I said on the show earlier today, guessing the rotation, I think Garrison might be the odd man out of a guy who's been playing most games all year long, but he's just not been playing very well this last couple of weeks, basically, and he was rough in this one. 2 points in 6 minutes. There you go. Keaton Wallace, 19 minutes, 3 points, 3 assists, 1 of 4 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3. I don't love the Keaton plus Trey minutes. I get why Keaton is around and playing because you need somebody that's, filling minutes there. Which are out the 4. I don't want to. I personally would not play Keaton with Trey. He's another guy that I don't think is going to play much. If I had to guess right now, when you bring in LeVert in particular plus Mann, maybe they will still keep doing what they're doing and playing him with backup point guard. But people have kind of forgotten this. There was like a 6-week stretch earlier this year where Keaton was just in the G League the whole time, basically, or at least most of the time, and they were playing the combination of Dyson and Veet at point guard. Now you have Dyson, Veet, and LeVert, and Mann, who can all handle the ball. So I don't know if they're going to go back to Keaton or not, but there you go on that front. Veet Krejci, 31 minutes off the bench, 11 points, a career-best 10 rebounds for Veet in this game. Sorry, he tied his career high in rebounds with 10. 3 assists, plus 4 in the game. Only took 7 shots. Like, Veet was just okay. I don't think Veet was incredible, but the rebounding was impressive. The passing is always good for Veet. Not a super high volume game offensively. You probably want to see more than that from him. But he also closed the game, which people did not like. I don't hate it as much as everybody else does about Ricochet not playing more because it's a back-to-back. If it wasn't, I would have been like pounding the table with everybody else. But I know people don't like this. They clearly are managing Ricochet's minutes. And I know he's young, but that's part of why. The Hawks understand, at least their training staff, and you don't have to agree with them, but I'm not a genius on this front. I'm not a doctor. But Ricochet is a skinny 19-year-old who had a long season last year playing professional basketball into May, and then went to the draft, went to summer league, didn't really get a huge break. And they're trying to make sure he's not overworked. That's my best read of the situation. Don't have to love that. That's just the reality. But anyway, Veet was fine in this game. Larry Nance, 20 minutes, 11 points, 4 assists. I thought Larry played his best game in a while. He's been pretty shaky since he got back from the hand injury. Understandable, he was probably rusty, but he played well in this one. I don't think he played as well as the plus 23 indicates that he played, but he played well in this game. Good to see him come back and give him some good minutes in this one. Gueye was really, really fun in this one and really good as well. 15 points, 12 rebounds, a first career double-double for Mo. 4 blocks, also career high for Mo. He was 5 of 6 on 2s, 1 of 5 from 3. Offensively, it's still a work in progress. That's still fair to say. I understand it's fun. It is fun, to be sure. But if you're wondering why Mo was in the G League all last week, it's because they don't trust him on offense yet. That's kind of the reality. Defensively, he has been really impressive. The rim protection, the just motor and the size and the length are undeniable. I liked what the Hawks did in this game kind of with their pairings. It might change when you get Niang in. You might get, got more bodies in starting maybe as soon as tomorrow. But going with Barlow and Okongwu and then going with Gueye and Nance makes sense because Gueye as a rim protector could really help Nance, who's a little bit limited in that area. Barlow is a better offensive player right now than Mo, probably, without the shooting anyway, but isn't quite the defender, and you want to pair him with a Congo. So I think that makes sense on both counts. The bench guys were better in this game than the starters were, but I thought that Mo was obviously, individually probably the biggest story. He was on the podium after the game. He seemed to be in a great mood, obviously. You love to see that from Mo. So everybody root for him. By all accounts, a great young man, and a fun night at the office for Mo Gueye. Moving forward, I don't know how much Mo is going to play, but obviously a night like this probably earns him some more looks, which makes sense to me and hopefully to everybody else. All right. Elsewhere, Don Barlow, 20 minutes, 7 points, 4 rebounds. Don was fine in this game. Wasn't incredible. Defensively, had some shaky moments, to be sure. Right now, again, Mo's the better defender than Dom is, but Don's been around all year long. By the way, keep an eye. This is not reporting. This is just a guess. I think the Hawks might want to consider getting creative with Don Barlow, maybe signing him to a very team-friendly multi-year deal with that roster spot that's available. Just want to flag that. We'll come back to it at a later date. Ricochet, 20 minutes, 13 points, 3 rebounds for Zach. He was 5 of 6 on twos, 1 of 4 from 3. He was fine. I think he should have played more probably, but again, back-to-back, all that stuff. I thought he did a good job, not a great job, but was fine. Okongwu, 14 points, 12 rebounds, 2 assists. He was minus 18 in the game. That's not really on him. Sometimes plus-minus is revelatory. If you watch the game, it kind of fits what your eye saw. Tonight, I don't think he was the reason why they were struggling in those minutes. It's just kind of the way it happened. I thought he was okay. I don't think he was great by any means, but he certainly was all right in this game. Dyson Daniels, man, he's really good. 15 points, 10 assists, a career high for Dyson, 6 rebounds, 2 turnovers and a +8. He was 4 of 10 on twos, a little bit shaky with the floater in this one, but 1 of 2 from 3. I thought Dyson was really good again. Every night's the same thing, it feels like right now with Dyson Daniels. But look, this is 4 games in a row now where he's been putting up pretty significant numbers across the board. For example, in the month of February, I think he's averaging 19 points per game. And I want to say it's 7 assists, maybe more than 7 assists per game in these 4 games in February. So really productive. The defense is always awesome. And you love what you see from Dyson. And then Trey led the team in score with 24 points. He was just okay. He was only 7 of 14. Well, actually, that's pretty good from 2. 7 of 14 from 2 is pretty good. But 2 of 8 from 3, 7 assists is below his norm. But actually, a key thing here, 2 turnovers for Trey in this game. So he did not play his best, but he didn't have to. And I think everybody else picked him up. And the Hawks did a good job, generally speaking. So I'll leave it there for now. But it was a really, really fun comeback. I hope that comes across if you watch this game or if you didn't on a Friday night. And obviously a jam-packed show in a lot of ways with so much going on when it comes to the trade deadline and all that. But we'll have more coming up, I'm sure, on Fallout. Much more observations about the new guys when they arrive, starting tomorrow maybe. So the Hawks play a back-to-back with travel in D.C. on Saturday. Tonight, by the way, was the last home game for the Hawks in 13 days because it's a combination of a road trip and then, of course, the All-Star break in the middle of that. So it's a 7 o'clock start in Washington tomorrow. This is their 4th and final game against Washington this year. They famously lost the first 2. Now, they won the last one, the most recent one, I should say, against Washington. But the Wizards did play tonight, but it was at home. So no travel, a slight advantage there for Washington. What that means is we have no injury reports for either side. Now, there is a chance that the Hawks have some fresh legs tomorrow because they might have all 3 of, in theory, Terrence Mann, Karis LeVert, and George Niang, who didn't play tonight, and maybe even Capella. They could get 4 guys back who didn't play tonight, who would be in the rotation for the Hawks tomorrow. We'll see if they take Gueye to Washington because, again, he would be playing his 3rd game in a row. It would be kind of tough for him to do that logistically. But, obviously lots of questions, but we'll have a full podcast as we always do. It's a Saturday, and some shows might punt that one, but hey, I won't. I will be here with a podcast after that game is over. All right, everybody. A lot of podcasts today, a lot of podcasts yesterday. Please do me a favor and subscribe to the show as well as listen to all the shows from this week. It's been a busy one. Hopefully you enjoyed the coverage, even if you did not love what the Hawks did at the deadline, as most seem to not. But there you go. I explained all that in detail that I possibly could have. So please subscribe to the show. And please also follow us on social media. We are on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. I am there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And if you want to follow my non-podcast work, whether it comes to extra audio and writing stuff, you can find that all at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your Friday into Saturday. I'll be back in about 24 hours with more on the Hawks, and we'll see you all next time.